In this lecture, we're going to mock a method. We'll receive an error because the $t function is undefined. Open the home component file in your editor. In the home component, we'll look at our template. In the template, we're calling the $t function to output a translation. The view i18n library defines this function. The library isn't registered because the component is being tested in isolation. We have two options. We can register the plugin or mock the function. We're going to mock the function because the test we're writing doesn't need the plugin to be completely available. Mocking is the process of creating a fake feature in our app. We can mock functions, components, directives, almost anything, really. We've already experienced how to mock a component by using stubs. Whenever deciding between mocking or importing the feature, you need to ask yourself if the feature is necessary for the test. If the test requires a specific feature, we'll import it. Otherwise, if it can be mocked, it should be mocked. Let's open our test file. We can mock global methods by using the global option. We'll add it to the shallow mount configuration object. Previously, we used this option to stub the router link component. We can use it to mock other global features. We can mock global functions by adding the mocks object. The mocks object allows us to define global variables and functions. It's important to understand that this is not for adding methods to a component. The functions you define in this object will act as global functions. The $t function is a global function, not a method for the component. There's a distinction between the two. We'll define the $t function. The function will have one parameter called message and return it. Basically, this function will return the original message. It'll result in outputting incorrect translations. That's perfectly fine. We're not interested in testing the translation. It's not the main focus of our test. Let's go back to the UI and run the test again. The test will pass without a problem. Great! We are not finished with our test yet. We know for sure it's rendering the list of songs. However, we don't know if it's rendering the list in the correct order. The next test we'll write will check if each song item component is rendering the correct data. We don't want the list to be in a mixed order. The first list item should have the first object, the second item should have the second object, so on and so forth. We'll create a loop to test each item. Let's go back to the editor. We're going to call the forEach function on the items array. The findAllComponents function returns an array. We can run array functions like we would any other array. In the callback function, we'll add references to the item and index in the array. We'll call them wrapper and I respectively. Let's switch to the song item component for a moment. The component will accept the data via a prop. It assigns the data to a prop called song. We'll create a test that'll compare the value of the song prop to the item it corresponds to in the array. If they both match, then the test should pass. Back in the test, inside the loop, we'll call the expect function. The value we'll pass in is wrapper.props.song. The props function will return a component's props. We can then access any of the props through their name. In this case, we're accessing the song prop in the component. We'll want to compare this value to its corresponding item in the array. They should both match since the home component will loop through them in the order they're passed in. Chain the to function. We'll pass in songs I. Let's run the test. The test will pass. By using the props function, we were able to retrieve the data in a child component to compare it with data from the parent component. There's one last thing I want to mention before ending this lecture. The test will work without a problem. In our test, we need the song item component to be functional. However, the last time we wrote a test for the song item component, we had to mock the router link component. We don't need to in this case. The reason we're not mocking the router link component is because we're using the shallow mount function. If our child components are using other components, they will not work, nor will the test throw an error. The shallow mount function limits what children components can do. Therefore, we don't need to mock the router link component. This is why we're not receiving an error. We'll leave it at that. In the next lecture, we'll write more tests.